Hey guys, in this video I'll be talking about landscape composition. There are several basic principles that I want to talk about when it comes to painting landscapes. I know that there are many different principles about painting landscapes that can take up an entire book, and so in this video I just want to share with you several of the most fundamental ones that can help you get started. The area of art is so subjective, and of course there are exceptions to the rule that still have artists creating awesome works that do not follow any conventions. But there is a reason why some paintings get sold and some just don't get any attention at all. Except for the occasional, bless your heart, that's wonderful landscape from your mom or family friend. Following these conventions can help accelerate your painting to a whole new level if you are not familiar with these concepts. Okay, let's get started. The first is the use of thirds rule. So breaking up the painting into 3 sections makes a huge difference in how the painting is viewed. It becomes more aesthetically pleasing to the eye and somehow unites the elements together. Now these 3 sections don't have to be perfectly equal, but using them in some form of proximity will help to harmonize the artwork. And of course, since we are talking about landscapes, some type of order must exist in this subject in order for it to really come to life. Look at some of these photos of my art. None of them have equal parts divided up into 3 completely evenly, but there are 3 main sections that somehow fall into line: the background, the middle ground, and the foreground. Some of these sections have weaving paths that lead the eye to the next section. Another thing about using this rule of thirds principle also applies to properly using your reference photograph or your environment if you're painting outside. You can't always paint a photograph directly at its face value. Many times photographs don't have the proper composition inside them to make them harmonious. And so that's why when you see many famous landscape paintings, they're in fact exaggerating some parts of the photograph or environment they are depicting. So when you're using a reference photo, play around with it by manipulating some of the parts of the image. Drag down the horizon if you need to, or raise it up for it to fit into that 1/3 section of the painting. If you have to move some things around for them to be more pleasing to the eye, then so be it. You should not compromise aesthetics for accuracy. Accuracy is for construction workers. We are artistes. Okay, the next element I want to talk about is the focal point, or the point of interest. Okay. So the focal point, or the center of interest, you would want to have a primary thing in this painting to draw the viewer's attention. That could be a building, which is common in landscape works, could be an animal, or even just an interesting part of the landscape like a marvelous cascading waterfall or epic looking sunlit area. Whatever this part is, it should have the most aesthetically pleasing attributes in the entire painting. I would suggest that this area be the most vibrant, colorful, and have the most light and dark contrasted parts to it as well, so that it can be the centerpiece or main actor, while everything surrounding it are like the supporting cast. Also, don't forget about the rule of thirds. Whatever object of interest you have, make sure you place it in one of the imaginary grid lines that break up the painting. Do not split the painting in half, whatever you do. Try to avoid having any edges of the object touching or intersecting the painting at any halfway point. And that's both for the horizontal and vertical orientation. It's just going to disrupt the flow of the painting and it's just not going to look that good. Whatever roadways or waterways that you have in a landscape should help point towards this object, so that they will lead the eye towards this focal point instead of away from it. One thing you want to avoid in landscape painting is having any objects that lead the eye away from the painting. One way that helps with this is to darken the objects that are closer to the edges of the painting. This will help to make them more obscure and help create a vignette effect where the edges are slightly darkened, which is a technique that photographers also use when they edit their shots. You can have a secondary point of interest as well if you want, but no more than that. The secondary one shouldn't be as prominent as the first one, so tone down the contrast and any other bells and whistles that would draw attention to it. Here is a fine example of how not to follow this principle in this old painting that I did. Look at how the colors are very evenly spread out everywhere, full of vivid greens and other colors that try to scream for attention everywhere. I thought that if I add more vivid color and contrast to the scenery, that would make the painting look even more epic. Plus, isn't always more. You gotta tone down some parts in order to make room for the others. Objectively, it's not a bad painting, but it's just that there's no place that draws the eye. All the cottages and trees try to draw in the eye. And so, paradoxically, this makes the painting look flat and boring. It takes away the excitement to want to explore it. Okay, moving on. The third and final part that I want to talk about in this video. That is the value rule. It's like, it doesn't even have a name to it, just the principle of using values and color chroma to indicate distance and vice versa in landscapes. So this third one I want to talk about today is the use of color, values, and chroma. Value is the brightness or darkness of a color. Chroma is the grayness or intensity of a color. So let's use these principles here in landscape painting. The farthest objects will tend more towards a bluer color scale, whereas the closer objects will have a more red or warmer color scale. Also, the farther objects will have less color intensity, so you can add some gray to your background colors. This also includes the sky, where the blue color can in fact be toned down to a lower chroma. But of course, there can be exceptions if you are painting a sunlit sky during the daytime. But even then, don't let the beautiful daylight sky take away from other potentially pleasing elements of the painting. So here's the difference again between a photograph and a painting, where the landscape is idealized. In the photograph, the distant objects don't really look that different from the ones up front. But in a painting, you want to create that illusion of distance, giving the scene a more epic feeling to it, so that looking through it becomes an adventure instead of a brief snapshot with a camera. Although, side note, photographers these days can manipulate photos like crazy and come up with all sorts of insanely great and majestic images with their photo editing tools. Anyways, when it comes to using this principle, you shouldn't just stick with doing it one way. Some landscapes are more photorealistic and don't apply this principle that much, but some of them apply it to a more extreme measure, where the background fades into the distance, into the ether. And so there's no right or wrong way to do this, as long as it makes the painting more aesthetically pleasing. Also, pay attention to the sharpness of the objects in the background. They will become more blurry as they become more distant. And this, of course, is another deviation from photography, where all the objects are usually able to retain their sharpness. So basically, the further away the object is, the bluer, grayer, and blurrier it's going to get, and vice versa for closer objects. Okay, so these three principles are some of the most important ones to remember if you're going to paint landscapes. I know that there are exceptions to the rule, and there's some great looking abstract landscapes as well, but I'm going for more of the traditional route. But still, even when somebody does follow these painting conventions, your landscapes aren't going to conform and look like somebody else's. Each person has their own style, and sure, they might be similar to others, but I think each person's painting style is unique to them, like their own fingerprint or handwriting. So, stay tuned to my other videos that can help you take your painting to a new level, where you can continue your journey of developing your unique style and become the artist that you were meant to be. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.